In January 2026, Boston homeowners open their mailboxes to a shock. A 13% tax jump lands at once, and for that month, it feels like 26. Start with the ground underfoot. In October 2025, the median home list price in Boston was just under $800,000, the fifth highest among the top 50 U.S. metros and the highest outside California. Boston is a premium market. Now, residential property taxes in the city are set to rise by 13% beginning in January 2026, translating to $1,780 for the average homeowner. Because the new rate will be applied retroactively to the prior quarter, the January bill reads like a 26% quarter-over-quarter spike. For households that already budget around heating costs and winter utility bills, that is not a line item, it's a jolt. This tax wave didn't come out of nowhere. Boston's finances lean heavily on real estate. More than 70% of the city's $4.60 billion budget depends on property taxes, and the bulk of that historically comes from commercial properties. That pillar cracked. In 2205, commercial property values declined by 6%, while residential values rose by 2%. The math forced a shift. Commercial real estate taxpayers in the city will see a 4.4% decrease in their property tax bills, an average savings of $210,000, while the burden tilts toward residents. Officials have warned that taxes for the average single-family home are projected to be up 34% from 2023 to 2026. Without intervention, the tilt becomes a trend. Attempts to soften the blow stalled. Proposals to allow higher business rates beyond the state cap failed. A recrafted plan to set a 9% annual increase for residents also failed to clear the Senate. The city's latest rewrite has passed the local council again, but awaits action at the State House. Legislators are on break until the new year, and the clock is running. January still arrives. The bills still hit. The increase still reads like 13% for the year, 26% for the quarter, and $780 for the average homeowner. Zoom out to the rest of Massachusetts, and a different story emerges, one written in price tags. The pandemic-era frenzy has cooled, but it didn't vanish. Buyers are still competing for limited supply, pushing prices up for affordable properties, even as rising mortgage rates slowed growth. In November, the typical home value across the United States was $360,782, up just 0.2% over the prior year. In Massachusetts, the numbers didn't flatline. They stacked. Consider the top end first. In Weston, the typical home value reached $2,167,570 for the 12 months ending November 2025. Over that span, values rose by $80 at $2,624, a 4% jump in 1 year, and by $804,519 over 5 years, a 59% surge. In Wellesley, the typical home value hit $1,932,908, up $67,667 in 1 year, a 3.6% lift, and up $623,339 over 5 years, a 47.6% climb. Dover tallied $1,704,854, up $63,022 year over year, up $537,076 across 5 years, a 46% gain. These are not isolated swells. They are crests on a long wave. Newton, an affluent suburb frequently paired with Brookline in the local imagination, posted a typical home value of $1,461,113, with a 1-year gain of $51,806, or 3.7%, and a 5-year rise of $402,492, or 38%. Lexington reached $1,520,479, up $46,139 in 1 year, a 3.1% increase, and up $462,826 in 5, a 43.8% advance. Needham checked in at $1,477,660, with a $35,577 1-year jump, or 2.5%, and a 5-year gain of $465,159, Lincoln, smaller but formidable, showed $1,471,924, up $55,848 in 1 year, a 3.9% rise, and up $483,997 in 5 years, a 49% climb. Even in towns where the tempo slowed, appreciation held. Winchester's typical value was $1,487,257, up $28,835 year over year, a 2% move, and up $413,724 in 5 years, a 38.5% change. Belmont's $1,397,626 came with a $20,603 increase, just 1.5% for the year, and $339,633, or 32.1%, over 5.75%. Concord tallied $1,401,330 with a $42,117, 3.1% annual gain, and $483,305, $50, 2.7% across 5 years. The arc is persistent. Measured annual growth layered on top of outsized 5-year gains. Follow the shoreline. Chilmark on Martha's Vineyard posted a typical home value of $2,320,832, up $49,811 in 1 year, a 2.2% rise, and an eye-catching $749,747, or 47.7%, over 5 years. Manchester reached $1,270,1970,517 with a $53,310, or 4.4% 1-year jump, and a $442,545, or 53.4% rise over 5 years. Situate hit $963,151, gaining $29,966 year over year, a 3.2% increase, and $321,717 over 5 years, a 50.2% rise. Duxbury reached $1,057,580, up $33,933 in 1 year, 3.3%, and $385,808 across 550, 7.4%. Gloucester posted $743,335 with $26,146, or 3.6% for the year, and $238,596, or 47.3% for 5 years. The South Shore and North Shore alike, Newburyport at $906,016, up $25,983, or 3.0% year over year, and $293,860, or 48.0% over 5. Newbury at $908,599, up $22,416, or 2.6%, and $308,176, or 51.3%, remain emblematic of steady coastal demand. On Cape Cod's outer elbow, Provincetown posted $1,029,909, up $22,762, or 2.3%, year over year, and up $354,630, or 52.5%, over 5 years. North across the Merrimack, Raleigh at $776-628 added $21,226 in 1 year, 2.8%, and $231,816 in 5, 42.5%. Merrimack reached $641,023 with a $20,844 1-year rise, 3.4%, and $191,536 over 5 years, 42.6%. The pattern repeats. Modest annual ticks atop very large 5-year foundations. Head west, away from the ocean's premium, and the story adjusts, but doesn't break. In the Berkshires, Egremont reached $1,744, $164, up $43, and 1 year a 5.6% surge, and up $306,639, a 64.2% 5-year leap. Mount Washington posted $617,542, with a $35,985 one-year increase, 6.2%, and $191,974 in 5 years, 45.1%. Stockbridge hit $727,467 with a $22,579, 3.2% annual gain, and a $260,330, 55.7% 5-year rise. Even away from Boston and the coast, the 5-year slope is steep. The Springfield area shows more moderate baselines but still meaningful change. Longmeadow's typical value was $516,166, up $23,062 for the year, 4.7%, and $154,237 across 5, 42.6%. The Worcester area tells a similar story. Berlin marks $647,851, with a $20,797 one-year gain, 3.3%, and $182 2 over 5 years, $40 1.2%. If you are scanning for areas where a family dollar stretches further, these numbers signal options. The point is not that the bargains are cheap. It is that in a state where Weston clears $2,167,570 and Wellesley sits at $1,932,908, a typical value in the $516,166 to $640,851 range changes the calculus. On the South Shore, the year-over-year increases accelerated. Norwell posted $1,002,800 with a one-year increase of $56,407, a 6% jump, and a 5-year gain of $346,475, or 52.8%. West Bridgewater, at $577,325, still rose $21,615 in 1 year, 3.9%, and $163,605 over 5, 39.6%. Hanson's $591,955 climbed $20,317, or 3.6%, over the year, and $173,282, or $40, 1.4%, over 5.2%, over 10%. Pembroke reached $642,340 with a $20,577, or 3.3%, one-year move, and $186,775, or 41.0%, over 5. Marshfield hit $761,509 with a $22,097, or 3.0% annual rise, and a $253,571, or 49.9% 5-year gain. Here again, a broad base of appreciation. Appreciation. On the North Shore, Linfield sat at $1,058,731, up $21,401 year-over-year, 2.1%, with a 5-year increase of $330,767, 45.4%. Hamilton posted $856,000, up $26,000, or 3.1% annually, and $236,791, or 38.2%, over 5.2%. Wenham's $1,028,647 came with a $47,202, or 4.8% one-year bump, and a $367,894, or 55.7% 5-year rise. Topsfield hit 934 Town $277, up $24,450, or 2.7% in 1 year, and $280,182, or 42.8% over 5. Danvers at $708,724 saw $20,099, or 2.9% over the year, and $185,612, or 35.5% across 5. Reading's $1,878,1046 rose $20,000, $519, 2.4% on the year, and $246,921, $39 over 5. In Wayland, the typical home value was $1,119,875, with a $19,341 or 1.8%, 1-year change, and a $354,235 or 46.3%, 5-year increase. The gravitation to Greater Boston's ring shows up in the dollar gains. Even in markets where annual growth measured in tenths of a point, real money moved. Bedford's $1,953 added $20,550 in a year, 2.1%, and $268,067 over 5, 36.6. Marblehead's $997,637 ticked up by $22,648 in a year, 2.3%, and $201,201 over 5, $3,295.50. Arlington reached $1,031,693, rising $25,368 in 1 year, 2.5%, and $244,768 in 5, 31.1%. Westwood's $1,190,000, $500 added, $38,760, 3.4%, and $381,074, 47.1%. Sherborne's $1,188,919 matched a $38,761, 3.4% jump, and $369,954, 45.2% over 5. Boxford logged $1,030,736 with a $37,203 or 3.7% annual rise and a $322,640 or 45.6% 5-year move. Hopkinton at $928,300 added $22,225 in a year, 2.5%, and $290,212 in 5, 45.5%. The practical reality behind these numbers is simple. In many Massachusetts towns, the 1-year changes in the 12 months ending November 25 ranged from about 1.5% to just over 6%, often translating into tens of thousands of dollars per home. Over 5 years, increases often stacked between roughly 32% and 64%. For a family trying to buy into Lexington at $1,520,479 or Longmeadow at $516,166, the monthly math, the stress test, and the decision to jump depend not only on mortgage rates, but also on taxes, utilities, and everyday costs that don't show up in the listing price. This is where the cost of living enters the frame. Affordability isn't just the purchase price. It's the rental you're replacing, the utilities you'll run, the transportation you'll pay, the healthcare you'll need, the groceries you'll carry, and the taxes you'll owe, a constellation of categories that act together. Matching a lifestyle to a location means tallying those categories in Boston and Cambridge and then checking them against Worcester or Springfield or against suburban communities where a longer commute might buy more space. For buyers with higher budgets, Boston's luxury market is its own ecosystem. Brownstones in Beacon Hill and Back Bay, waterfront condominiums along Boston Harbor, contemporary penthouses in the Seaport District, and elegant estates in Brookline and Newton. The amenities shimmer, but the ledger still rules. The luxury ecosystem is active. A new entrant in Boston launched with a pipeline of more than 30 agents, collectively generating over $500 million in closed sales volume over the prior 12 months. That is real transaction flow in one metro and a sign that the high end remains liquid. The push also signals another shift at street level, an embrace of technology. The brokerage describes itself as AI first, leaning into tools designed to match buyers and sellers faster, to surface niches, a waterfront view in the Seaport, a brownstone with historic detail in Back Bay, a wellness suite in Newton for clients who value precision and speed. Technology isn't just for the top end. Nationally, the next year is expected to be a reset year. The forecast calls for the 30-year fixed mortgage rate to average 6.3% across 2026, down from an average of 6.6% in 2025. Mortgage rates may dip below 6% at times, but not for long stretches. The baseline prediction is that the median US.65 home sale price will rise 1% in 26. Existing home sales are expected to rise 3% from 25 levels, reaching an annualized 4.2 million. The direction is gentle. The recalibration is slow. Affordability should improve in that scenario because wages are expected to grow faster than home prices in 2026. That's the point of a reset. Costs normalizing in increments, not collapsing. It won't fix things for everyone in the short run. Gen Zers and young families still face high down payments and elevated monthly costs. Many will make trade-offs, moving in with roommates or parents or delaying having children. As of mid-2025, roughly 6% of Americans who struggled to afford housing moved in with their parents, and another 6% moved in with roommates. The expectation is that those shares rise in 26-6. Renters won't be invisible in this story. Nationwide, rents are expected to rise about 2 to 3% year over year by the end of 2026. Apartment construction has slowed from its 2022 surge and is expected to continue slowing, while many would-be buyers keep renting because down payments and monthly mortgage payments are still expensive. In other words, rent growth doesn't vanish just because mortgage rates drift down to 6.3%. It remains tethered to supply. Homeowners will pivot too. Mortgage refinance volume is expected to increase more than 30% in 2026, reaching $670 billion. A key driver is that about 20% of mortgaged homeowners had rates above 6% as of mid-2025, and those who bought recently with elevated rates want relief. The typical mortgaged homeowner had $181,000 in untapped equity as of mid-2025. That equity becomes a lever cash out refinances, home equity lines of credit, renovations instead of moves, multi-generational suites instead of separate addresses. Policy will be pulled into this. The affordability crisis is already center stage. The idea that a national housing emergency may be declared in 26 is on the table. Proposals to lower housing costs range from YIMBY measures to expand supply, to legal changes that make it easier to build accessory dwelling units and home additions, to legislation like the Yes in My Backyard Act and the Build More Housing Near Transit Act. The names are blunt. The intent is clearer. Unlock more places to live, closer to where people work, at price points that match incomes. The costs beyond the mortgage are drifting up too. The total cost of home ownership is rising because insurance premiums are skyrocketing, and large-scale AI-driven data centers are likely to push utility costs higher. Even as mortgage rates ease, these line items can hold overall budgets tight. That's why the Boston tax jump matters so much. 13% in January 2026 isn't just a tax change, it's another weight on the scale in a city where the median list price was just under $800,000 in October 2025. Now tie the threads. The property tax landscape in Boston is shifting because commercial values fell by 6% in 25, while residential values rose by 2%. A city that relies on property taxes for over 70% of a $4.60 billion budget had to keep the lights on. Commercial taxpayers receive a 4.4% cut and average $210,000 in savings. Residents get a bill that is 13% higher, retroactive in a way that makes January feel like a 26% quarterly jump and costs the average homeowner $780. At the same time, across Massachusetts, typical home values climbed between roughly 1% and 6% in a year, across dozens of places, from Norwell's 6% rise to Belmont's 1.5% nudge, while 5-year gains from about 32 to 64% are common. National mortgage rates are expected to average 6.3% in 2026, rents are expected to rise 2 to 3%, refinance volume is expected to reach $670 billion, and homeowners with $181,000 in typical equity have room to maneuver. Signals suggest these moving parts will change behavior on the ground. In Boston proper, a $780 tax increase for the average homeowner, layered over higher insurance premiums and the risk of higher utility costs, will force careful budget triage. Seniors on fixed incomes will feel the January math most sharply. High-income households in neighborhoods like Beacon Hill and Back Bay may absorb it more easily, but they will notice it just the same. Families choosing between Newton at $1,461,113, Lexington at $1,520,479, or Wellesley at $1,932,908 will run their scenarios. With cold precision, a four-figure tax swing or a 4/10 rate shift might dictate more square feet in West Bridgewater at $577,325 or Hanson at $591,000, or shape a move toward towns on the Worcester or Springfield orbit where typical values of $647,851 in Berlin or $516,166 in Longmeadow pull the monthly number lower. These aren't predictions. They are the choices embedded in the numbers. And the numbers paint Boston's cross-currents differently from the rest of the country. While the typical U.S. home value in November was $360,782, with a 0.2% year-over-year rise, Massachusetts routinely prints seven figures for suburban towns and six-figure annual increases in dollar terms. Weston added $82,624 in a year, Wellesley $67,667, Dover $63,022, Lincoln $55,848, Manchester $53,310, Newton $51,806, Chilmark $49,811, Wenham $47,202, and Lexington $46,139. In lower-priced places, the one-year dollar gains still matter. Longmeadow's $23,062, Berlin's $20,797, West Bridgewater's $21,615. For a buyer with a $700,000 budget, a $20,000 delta is decisive. The broker side is shifting too. A Boston expansion launching with more than 30 agents and $500 million in closed sales over the prior 12 months indicates that the market's upper tiers remain active. At the same time, national industry expectations call for local multiple listing services to gain autonomy, accelerating consolidation into larger regional networks with clearer rules and cleaner data. Layer on top the expected rise of generative AI as a real estate matchmaker, guiding people toward towns, neighborhoods, and even specific homes that align with budget and lifestyle criteria, and a picture emerges: tighter curation, faster matches, more targeted bidding. For high-end buyers, that could mean finding a Chilmark property with coastal resilience features, or a Newton home with air filtration systems and whole-house water purification. For first-time buyers, it could mean identifying the exact pocket of Worcester County that matches a commute and a child care plan. There is also a climate dimension that moves quietly. The expectation is not for a flood of people leaving the state. Instead, climate migration is predicted to go hyperlocal. In metros across the country, residents may shift from neighborhoods with greater risk of wildfire or flood to less vulnerable parts of the same area. The effect won't be uniform, but as insurance premiums climb and as maintenance for climate resilience becomes a line item instead of a luxury, the micro movements matter. They influence which blocks hold value best and which take longer to sell. They shape which towns maintain their 5-year climb, like Egremont's 64.2% or Stockbridge's 55.7%, and which ease into the 1-3% annual growth lane, like Belmont's 1.5% or Bedford's 2.1%. The rental market will play a quiet counter melody. If rents rise 2 to 3% by the end of 26, as expected, some households who could have stretched for a purchase may renew a lease instead, especially in towns where typical home values added tens of thousands in a year. In Scituate, up $29,966 in 1 year, or in Gloucester, up $26,146, the down payment and monthly uplift may still outpace wage gains even in a year when wages grow faster than home prices nationally. That dynamic could keep buyer competition focused on the most affordable towns, amplifying the 3-point-something% annual increases in places like West Bridgewater, Hanson, and Pembroke. The slow reset won't happen in isolation. Policy attention is building. YIMBY-oriented legislation aims to unclog the pipes, prioritizing building near transit and easing restrictions on accessory dwelling units and additions. The goals are long-run: push supply up, bring price pressure down, and allow multi-generational living where it fits. In practice, the changes will move slower than headlines. They will take years to translate into more keys in more hands. In the meantime, homeowners with $181,000 in typical untapped equity make decisions about whether to remodel a garage into a second primary suite for adult children moving back in, or to carve out an in-law unit for aging parents. Renovating wins when the alternative is chasing a home in Newton at $1,461,113 or Wellesley at $1,932,908 with a mortgage that still starts with a 6. The case of Boston's property tax adjustment illuminates how quickly a city's tax policy can reshape the equation. Commercial property values fell 6% in 25. Residential values rose 2%. Over 70% of a $4.60 billion budget rides on property tax receipts. The result is immediate and quantifiable: a 4.4% decrease for commercial property tax bills, averaging $210,000 in savings, a 13% increase for residential taxpayers beginning in January 2026, retroactively applied to the prior quarter, felt as a 26% quarterly jump, and a $780 hit for the average homeowner. This is fiscal gravity. It pulls where it must. For many households, tools that compare living costs across cities become essential. The ledger has to include everything beyond the mortgage or rent utilities in January and February: taxes that adjust mid-year, transportation costs that swing with gas prices or commuter rail schedules, healthcare, and groceries. Cities like Boston and Cambridge command premium housing prices and premium amenities. Worcester, Springfield, and the constellation of suburban communities offer more moderate baselines. The viability of each option isn't a vibe. It's a spreadsheet. It's the difference between electing to live in a Watertown condo at a typical value of $812,810, up $22,611 in 1 year, and choosing a Berlin Colonial at $647, $851, up $2797 with a different commute and school district calculus. Let the numbers speak again. Hingham's typical value at $1,264,218 rose by $28,161 in 1 year, 2.3%, and by $421,044 in 5 years, 49.9%. Needham's $1,477,660 climbed by $35,577, 2.5%, and by $465,159, 45.9%. Cohasset's $1,361,625 jumped by $42,458, 3.2%, and by $463,855, $50, 1.7%. Lincoln's $1,471,924 rose $55,848, 3.9%, and $483,997, 49.0%. Sherborne's $1,182,919 ticked up by $38,761, 3.4%, and $369,954, 45.2%. There's a cadence here. Annual increases of 2 to 4%, with 5-year lifts brushing 50%. For a buyer in 2016, facing a 6.3% average mortgage rate, the difference between a 2% and a 4% 1-year price gain translates into real dollars added to the price tag, compounding the challenge of saving for a down payment. For an owner, those gains feel like validation. Until the tax bill lands. What's next? The base case for 2026 is a long, slow normalizing of the housing market, with national mortgage rates averaging 6.3%, the median U.S. home sale price rising 1%, and existing home sales edging up 3% to 4.2 million. Affordability improves because wage growth outpaces price growth. Rents rise 2 to 3% by year-end. Refinance volume climbs to $670 billion as more than 1 in 5 mortgaged households with rates above 6% try to cut monthly costs. In Massachusetts, the one-year home value gains recorded through November 2025, ranging from 1.5% in Belmont to 6.2% in Mount Washington and 6.0% in Norwell, with many towns landing between 2 and 4%, provide a recent measure of speed. Signals suggest that pace could ease modestly in a year when national price growth is just 1%. Watch 2 items closely. First, the tax policy lever in Boston. A rewritten plan has passed the City Council again, but awaits action at the State House. If a revised framework, like the previously proposed 9% annual increase limit for residents, gains approval early in 2026, it could steer how much of the burden residents carry in 2026 and 2027. The difference between a 13% increase and a 9% cap is real money. It determines whether the average homeowner's bill is up $780 or something closer to a smooth glide path. The timing matters as much as the number. Second, the mortgage rate path around that 6.3% average. The expectation is for occasional dips below 6% that don't stick. If those dips do stick for longer stretches in the spring or summer of 2026, buyer demand could pick up faster than in the base case, accelerating one-year price changes in towns already showing 3 to 4% momentum, like Lexington at 3.1%, Newton at 3.7%, and Needham at 2.5%. If dips don't materialize and rates hover above 6.5%, then the pressure shifts back to the rental market, pushing rents closer to the top of that 2 to 3% range and to equity-funded renovations, a route made easier by that typical $181,000 in untapped homeowner equity as of mid-2025. The risks are not only numerical. Insurance premiums are rising. Utility costs may rise alongside large-scale AI-driven data centers. Climate risk perceptions are driving micro-movements within metros. Industry rules are shifting as local multiple listing services take more control and consolidate. Technology is evolving swiftly enough that an AI search assistant might be the first agent a buyer encounters. In that blend, Massachusetts households will decide and adapt the way they always have, town by town, budget by budget. Whether that means absorbing a $780 tax increase in Boston, trading space for price in Longmeadow at $516,166, chasing a 5-year upslope in Edremont at 64.2%, or anchoring in Newton at $1,461,113 because it matches the life they want. Amid all this, the shape of the Massachusetts market is remarkably clear. Prices rose for the year in places as disparate as Norwell and Berlin, Chilmark and Danvers, Longmeadow and Lexington. The 5-year gains are staggering in many corners: $804,519 in Weston, $623,339 in Wellesley, $537,076 in Dover, $483,997 in Lincoln, $463,855 in Cohasset, $421,040 in Hingham. Boston's property tax shift is immediate and sharp. 13% in January 2026, retroactive to the prior quarter, described as a 26% quarterly impact, and $780 for the average homeowner, driven by a 6% drop in commercial values and a 2% rise in residential values in 2025. In a city where over 70% of a $4.60 billion budget depends on property taxes, the national background hum is a 6.3% mortgage rate, a 1% price rise, a 3% sales uptick to 4.2 million, rents rising 2 to 3%, and refinance volume reaching $670 billion. The numbers don't tell us how to feel. They tell us what to weigh. The base case is calm, a gradual reset, not a freefall, and not a surge. The risk to that calm, here, is policy delay. If Boston's tax plan remains stuck, the residential burden stays heavy, and households recalculate where they live and what they buy. The upside risk is a mortgage rate drift below 6% for longer spans, which could unlock sideline demand and nudge one-year gains above the 2 to 4% band across more towns. In a state where Weston can move $82,624 in a year and Longmeadow $23,062, small percentage shifts become big dollar outcomes. Be deliberate. Track the numbers. Make your choices with both the listing price and the living price in view. And if you want more grounded breakdowns of Massachusetts housing, built on hard numbers and clear stakes, consider joining us for the next one.